Hi, my name is Chris Freeman, and I'm 62 years old. I've been married to my husband, Buck, for 10 years. My hobby, or other life, if you will, is a musician. I hate to call it my hobby because it's not really a hobby. It's my life. But I just did not make as much money from it as I wanted to. So I had to have a day job. I was born in Seattle. I lived all over Washington. It was a rough upbringing. The difference between my sisters and myself is 11 years. I was not a wanted baby. By the time I was 10, my mother was found to be an unfit mother. My dad got custody, but also was told by the courts that I needed a female influence. Before I went to go live with my dad, my mother got one last summer with me. And then my dad took me to the house that I thought, oh, well, I'm going back to my bedroom. No, I was not going to be having the same living situation because now he was married and I had 4 stepbrothers. My dad was an alcoholic. My mother was an alcoholic and a drug addict. So he would get drunk and then he would tell me about, the times when he was 19, 20, finding these Japanese in the caves and cutting off their ears and burning them alive, and these horrible atrocities he would tell me about that he committed when he was young, and then went to work for his father-in-law. So when they decided they were going to get divorced, he lost everything. We were absolutely dirt poor. My mother got all the money. My dad got me. I ended up going to 2 elementary schools, 4 junior highs, and 3 high schools, all in different school districts. So we moved around a lot. I was always the youngest in my class. But as soon as the talk of sex came out, kids would tease me, calling me gay or calling me fag or calling me femme or some other derogatory. And I was like, what are they talking about? I don't know what they mean. So at 16, I had sex with a girl. We had sex many times and I loved it. I thought it was great. The winter of 78, halfway through my junior year, my dad had been going through my clothes and he found a joint in my pocket. And he said, you know the rules about drugs in this house. So this weekend, you are going to move out. You're going to leave this house and you're not coming back. So you get to choose. You can go into foster home or you can go on your own. I always wondered, what was at the root of him kicking me out? And I realized it was money. We were dirt poor. We were so poor that we couldn't afford shampoo. So we would get, bulk Irish or ivory soap. It was the cheapest soap. And when it got down to the smallest, we'd cut it into strips and put it into shampoo bottles and fill it up with water. That was our shampoo. I begged my parents for a pair of jeans. I got one pair of jeans that my mother bought at the thrift store, and they were women's jeans in 1976. And she forced me to wear them because we didn't have any other money and she bought them for me. So I had to wear women's jeans to school. Yeah, he had to kick me out and he was looking for a reason. I lived on my own. I went full time at my job at Shakey's Pizza and I sold drugs at school. And I just made sure that I was not noticed a lot. I talked to my boss at the time. Across the street from the Shakey's, there was an opening and an apartment building there, and he agreed to co-sign a lease with me. He was a very good friend back then. So when I got kicked out, nobody helped me. My sisters, my brothers, I got zero help from anybody in my family. Nobody asked me where I was living, so they didn't care. But it was tough not having a relationship with my dad for almost a decade. He just would not talk to me at all. So at one point he was good and drunk and he said, I'm going to tell you something. I was like, oh, here we go. Another story about the Japs in the caves back in World War II. And he said, no, this was about when I was required to get a psychiatric evaluation during the divorce from your mother. And my folder was sitting on the table on the desk, and I flipped it around and opened it, and it said latent homosexual. So I think my dad, at that drunken moment, basically was telling me he was probably gay himself and could never, ever bring himself to entertain it at all. In 1977, just before I got kicked out, they would have TV shows with rock bands on them. And I always had an interest in music, and I did well at it, but I didn't like rehearsing. I didn't like I took piano lessons, but I hated rehearsing it. And I don't want to play this garbage. I hated it. But then one of those nights, I saw this band, Kiss. I was shocked. I was just like, oh my God, this is everything I love. I ran and grabbed, my brother had an acoustic guitar in the closet, and he had long since left the house, so he didn't care, and it was beaten up anyway. And I thought, all right, that's what I want to do. This is what I want to be. My first IRS refund check from my job at McDonald's, I took that money and bought a bass. And I came home with it, and my dad was like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "It's a bass." And I'm a musician. I'm gonna do. What are you doing? Spending your money on an instrument? You need to go to college. You're gonna be going to college in a year. I'm like, really? On what money? We had no money. I wasn't going to go to college, so I thought, well, I'm going to be a musician. That's what I want to do. So church was something that I did for a while, but then it came to light. They're saying that you're a fag. They're saying that you're gay. Is this true? And I said, well, I don't know. And that pretty much was like, okay, you're no longer teaching Sunday school. You're not really going to be welcome to some of the functions, the church functions that I used to go to. I was very thankful then that rock kind of saved me from that, because it was kind of right at the same time. I was being dumped by my church, and then I realized, oh, I want to be a musician. When it came time for me to come out, I mean, I'd had girlfriends, and I thought it was okay. But at one point, I got away from my high school group of friends, and I thought, well, I don't really have any long-term friends. I don't really have a band right now. Maybe I should find out if I'm really gay. Why don't I take a minute and see if I can figure out how to have a gay experience, just to see what it's about. I went to this place called the Arboretum in Seattle, which everybody now knows is a gay place, but I just went there because it was a place to swim. And there was this guy there, and turns out he was about 13 or 14 years older than me. So we went to a couple shows, and it was fun. And, we were having fun hanging out. And then one night we were at his house, and he said, I'm bisexual. I'm really attracted to you. And I was like, and I like all the oxygen was sucked out of my body, and I bolted. So when I went home and thought about it, I thought, well, this was your chance. Why don't you find out? I called him back. He introduced me to my first experience, and it was like, all the fireworks went off. Everything that I wished I'd had with women was happening with this guy. And I thought, all right, well, now I know. Now I know. There's no mistaking it. I'm definitely gay. And I stopped dating women. I just said, no, I think I'm gay. I'm going to move on. I stayed with this guy, but he turned out to be a real asshole. Real asshole. What I found out later was he was going to Mexico to be with little boys. I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was interested in that much younger, but he was. Long after the fact. I didn't know it at the time. And then at some point, I determined that I was going to leave Seattle. San Francisco was amazing, but it was also a hotbed of AIDS at the time. For me, musically, I was not getting anything off the ground. I tried a few things. So I kind of gave it up, and I fell into a new vocation, which was video editing. mutual friends were getting married, and I had videotaped a bunch of stuff with people saying stuff about it. A friend of mine worked at Wells Fargo. She knew somebody in the video area. This editor, this friend that we ended up becoming my boss. She was a smoker. So every 15 minutes, she'd have to go downstairs and have a break. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm familiar with recording. This looks similar. It's tape. And so she showed me how to roll and how to do things. And so by the end of the project, she said, you're a natural editor. I'm going to get you a job here. So within 6 months, I was working at Wells Fargo. Then at the same time, I was reading through the music papers because I just was trying to stay current, even though I wasn't doing anything. And I saw an ad for somebody looking for gay musicians into early Beatles, Ramones, and Buzzcocks. And I was like, I thought I was the only gay musician. I knew nobody else that was gay. Nobody. And so I'm like, is this a joke? Is this somebody, because there was a lot of fag bashing back then, is what they called it. So I didn't know if this was somebody who was just trying to lure somebody to their house. And so I told a friend that I was going, and I went to his house, and he gave me this tape, and he said, I'm in this band called Pansy Division. And at that point, he had the whole first album recorded. So I put the tape in my Walkman, and I put it on, and I was like, I'd never heard songs like this. They were openly gay, songs like the Sucker Club, Versatile. These songs just came one after another, like gay, 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 gay. I was like, oh my God. And then I realized, oh, I'm going to have to sing these songs in front of people. He wants me to get on stage and sing these songs. Like, I don't know if I can. I mean, it was so unbelievable. He was like, there's no other gay rock bands. There's no other gay musicians. If nobody's going to do it, then we should. We're both over 30. Nobody's going to sign us. We're both openly gay. Nobody's going to sign us. Let's just see what happens. And within about 2 weeks of my saying, yeah, okay, I'm going to do this with you. Let's do this. Freddie Mercury died. We realized, oh, this is our cause. The fact that Freddie Mercury died, and the only thing he said was that he had AIDS 24 hours before he died. He didn't come out. He never said he was gay. And I was like, there it is. There it is. We have a mission now. And within a year of joining that band, we had a record deal. By 1993, we were getting ready for album number 2. Well, Green Day jumped to a major, and they said, we want to bring you guys out on tour with us because we think it'll really mess with our audience. I quit my job at Wells Fargo at the time to go on tour with Green Day. And by the end of the tour, we were playing like Madison Square Garden, Cobo Hall, San Diego Sports Arena, all these huge places. And we were doing it, talking about gay sex. And it just was mind-blowing. MTV thought so too. They did a special on us. So things started to get more and more insane. Well, we really only made money for about 5 years. Then a little event happened in 2000 where Metallica sued Napster. And that changed everything. Because now everybody knew that they could get music online for free. And nobody was ever going to pay for music again if they didn't have to. So we realized, well, we're not going to sell our CDs anymore. That was a big income stream. But then also I had reached 40. Now, if Pansy Division had happened to me in my 20s, I would have had another decade. But it happened to me in my 30s. And so when I hit 40, I said, John, we're not making the money that we used to on tour. We're sort of oversaturating markets now by playing them too often just because we have to make money. And it's still not enough to cover rent in San Francisco. By this time, 2000, the dot-com craze had taken over San Francisco and rents were insane. And I thought, well, I need to stop touring because I got to get a job. I've only got 25 more years of earning power. I can't end up like my parents. Both of my parents ended up penniless, basically. And so I thought, well, I got nothing coming from an inheritance. It's only going to be me. I've got nothing now. I've got to start. And John thought that might be the end of the band, and it hasn't been. But I ended up moving as well to get a job, moving to LA. In fact, we're now in 4 separate cities, and 2 of us are on the East Coast, and we're still together. But through all this time, I really didn't have a relationship. I had somebody that I was seeing who was into S&M, and I really wasn't into S&M, but I thought, well, I'll try it. I'll try it, as long as it doesn't hurt me anyway. So I became a top in this relationship, which I didn't really want to. I didn't feel like doing these things. It just felt unnatural to me. But I wrote a song about it called James Bondage. But then that broke up because he got into coke and into crystal. And I'm like, I'm done. That was probably 97. I was a slut. I was fucking anything on tour, anything. I was having sex all over the place. Safe sex, always safe sex, but I had a lot of it. And then I moved to LA for a job. At the time, this film school offered free tuition to their employees. So I took full advantage of it. And that meant that I couldn't date anymore. So I put myself off the market, and I was just tricking with guys I'd meet on websites. And I was in school for 3 years, and I graduated in 07. And in 08, I met somebody on one of these websites. We thought we might date again. I mean, we tricked once, and then it was like, okay, well, maybe that'll happen again. The other thing that I was conscious of was I had really spent most of my dating life involved with older men. But I thought, well, if I'm looking for a relationship, I should probably date a little more age appropriate. So I tried dating some guys that were more my age. Oh my God, it was disastrous. A lot of these guys had no direction. They weren't even thinking about the retirement. And so I thought, oh my God, all right, well, I thought I was late to the table for that. At some point, though, I was hanging out with a friend. So we're going to this dive club meeting of some sort. And then we're driving in this neighborhood. And I'm like, Mark, I've been in this neighborhood before. This is kind of a weird neighborhood to be in. And then I realized, wait a minute, are we going to that house? I think I've been at this house. It's this guy that I dated over a year ago, had one date with, and we'd kind of been sending photos of each other, to each other, just sort of tantalizing, but never really meeting up again. So we'd met in 08 and then started dating properly in 09. We got married in 2014 and we're still together now. It can be challenging, I think, for people who maybe have been around a lot or had a lot of sex to kind of just be with one person. I just find that I can kind of channel all of that into what we have together, and it works out just fine. So I realized I was going to have to become a diver to be with this guy whose life is about diving. And then also in the music world, he was always interested, but now he's a ukulele player. Now he's taking lessons, and he's been playing for a number of years, and he's got a dozen ukuleles, and also with my band. So he comes on tour with us. He'll help sell merch. He'll drive the RV for us. So we've really found ways to mesh our 2 worlds together. I never got handed a thing. In fact, I was down to 0 many times in my life, down to absolutely nothing. So here I am as I'm getting older. I'm realizing, did I meet my goal? Yeah, I made my goal. I mean, at some point I said, God, if you're there, I will do whatever you want if you just show me what's going on. Show me what you want me to do. Well, in a way, God did, because now I'm in a gay band helping people feel better about themselves for being gay. So if there was a point to my life, being a gay musician ended up being the point to my life. I can't really say that there's a God because I don't believe in God at all. But if you want to think about it that way, then yeah, my life had a purpose and this is it. and I can be out, completely out, like to the absurd level of being out. I feel way more comfortable being who I am and letting everybody around me know, because there's nothing good about hiding anything in your life like that. You're only as healthy as your secrets. And I didn't want any. My therapist said it'd be a good idea for you to reconnect with your mother, and same with my dad. In 2007, when I'd finished school, my dad needed help moving he and his third wife into an assisted living situation. They were getting much older. And so I went and lived with my dad for a month. And I learned just what a lousy piece of shit he was. But I felt badly for him. I finally realized, oh, he's a broken person who found himself in a situation he had no idea what to do. So I felt like, well, all right. All I can do is push forward. Already, I was the first person in my family to finish college. So I'd already taken that step. I bought my own condo by then. I was doing way better in my life than I think he was. He acknowledged that. He never gave me any money at all. But at one point, he said, I'm going to pay you $5,000 as a graduation present. So he gave me $5,000. And I'm sure that was all he had, because he died penniless. So at some point, I think he wanted to have a relationship with me, but just couldn't, because I was a successful homosexual. And that's really, I think, what he could not do in his mind, was be successful as a homosexual. And here I was, at even one point, I on the Green Day tour when we were playing Madison Square Garden. So this was back, 13 years earlier from that. I called him from backstage at Madison Square Garden because I was so proud of myself. What musician doesn't want to be able to say that they played Madison Square Garden once? And so I was backstage and I said, Dad, I just played Madison Square Garden. And he was like, oh, good kid. He had he could not care less. He'd never seen me perform. It's interesting that I became a musician. I became successful at a certain level. And I did it without any false pretenses. I was able to say, I'm a musician, but I'm a gay musician. And that's what I ended up being famous for, is being a gay musician. So I was able to become, yes, a successful homosexual that my father could not find himself to do. So, yeah, it's possible to be a successful homosexual and not just practicing.
Thank you very much.
Sure.